They threw me away like I was nothing. My own children, me flesh and blood, dragged me out of the only home I had ever known and locked me inside a beige prison disguised as a nursing facility. They thought I was weak, finished, too broken to fight back. But what they didn't know was that I still had a secret weapon, a single piece of paper, the deed to my house. My house. The home I had bled for, worked 2 jobs for, raised them in. And with that discovery, the mother they discarded became the storm they never saw coming. Betrayal cuts deeper when it comes from family, but revenge tastes sweeter when it's born from survival. This is not a story of defeat, it's a war cry from every woman who refused to be erased. Subscribe now to Silent Lies, because the truth I'm about to tell will shake you to your core. The morning they came for me was colder than it had any right to be. Not because of the weather outside, but because of the chill in my bones that told me something was wrong. I had been up since dawn, fussing with the curtains, straightening the pictures on the wall, and setting the kitchen table as if we were preparing for a family celebration. 4 mugs, a plate of cookies, a pot of coffee steaming with hope. I told myself it was just a visit, a kind gesture, maybe a chance to feel like we were a family again. How naive that thought seems now. Karen arrived first, her heels striking the floor like gunshots. Her smile was tight, controlled, and her eyes darted away from mine as if contact would burn her. David followed, barely lifting his head from the glow of his phone screen. Luke came last, clutching a manila folder that seemed to throb with menace before he even laid it down. My heart stuttered at the sight of it. "Mom," Karen began in that syrupy voice people use with children or the dying. "We've been talking." Those words, 4 little syllables, were the beginning of my undoing. My breath caught in my chest as she laid out their plan, dressed up in gentle words. A wonderful facility, a safe new home, people who could take care of you better than we can. I almost laughed at the performance. It sounded more like a sales pitch for a resort than a decision about my life. "I'm not going anywhere," I said. Calm, steady, clutching my mug so tightly the ceramic dug into my palm. Luke slid the papers across the table. Legal forms, declarations, evidence of a betrayal I had never seen coming. "Mom, you've been forgetting things. We're just trying to protect you," he said, as if the words could excuse the knife he was twisting into me. Protect me? From what? From my own independence? From the life I had built with my own hands? Karen leaned closer, her perfume thick, suffocating. "You already signed the power of attorney, remember?" The world tilted. My breath faltered. My mind searched through foggy memories of long nights, a fall in the kitchen, Karen's voice urging me to sign just a medical form. I had trusted her. I had trusted all of them. They were my children. I never thought they would use that trust as a weapon. Within an hour, my suitcase was packed. They chose the clothes, the photographs, even the shoes. My life was crammed into one battered case, while the rest, the memories, the love, the walls that had held my laughter and my tears was left behind. My house, my home, the place where I raised them, where I buried my husband, where I fought tooth and nail to keep the roof from collapsing when bills stacked higher than I could manage. They stripped it from me with the efficiency of thieves. The ride to the facility was suffocating. David drove in silence. Karen tapped on her phone, and Luke sat beside me but never looked at me. Not once. The air was thick with unspoken guilt and the cloying scent of betrayal. When we arrived, I stared at the beige walls rising in front of me. A prison dressed up as care. No garden, no trees, no life. Just concrete, fluorescent lights, and the faint smell of antiseptic. That first night, I cried into my pillow, the sound muffled, as if even my grief wasn't welcome. I did not cry for the cold sheets or the bland food. I cried because the people I had bled for, sacrificed for, had reduced me to an obstacle. They no longer saw me as their mother. I was a burden, a piece of furniture they no longer wanted. I thought about my hands. These hands that had once braided their hair, stitched their Halloween costumes, held them through fevers. Hands that scrubbed dishes after midnight shifts. Hands that ached from typing reports and folding laundry. Hands that had carried a family alone after George's heart stopped beating. I had given those children everything, and in return, they handed me over to strangers like an unwanted package. But grief, like fire, does not burn forever. Eventually, it smolders, and in the ashes you find something sharper. Resolve. I began to watch, to listen, to take note. The staff were kind but exhausted, moving like machines programmed to smile on command. The residents shuffled through the halls like shadows of who they used to be. But among them, I saw sparks. Ruth with her loud laugh and poker games, Doy with her sharp eyes that missed nothing, Maxine with her straight spine and lawyer's wit. They were survivors just like me, hidden beneath layers of resignation. It was Ruth who noticed me first, who leaned over during a game of cards and said, "You've got that freshly betrayed look, honey. I know it well." And in that moment I laughed. A real laugh, my first in weeks. Something cracked open inside me, a reminder that I wasn't finished yet. That night, as I lay in my narrow bed, I remembered George's words, whispered in the kitchen years ago when bills piled high, and exhaustion nearly broke me. "Ellie, you're stronger than you think. You're the fire, not the ashes." I had forgotten. My children had tried to bury me, but they hadn't realized one thing. I was not done. The days blurred at first. Meals delivered on a tray, the echo of wheelchairs rolling down linoleum floors, the distant hum of televisions no one really watched. I learned quickly that a nursing home was not a place for living. It was a waiting room for those already forgotten. Every time I passed a mirror, I barely recognized the woman staring back, tired eyes, trembling lips, a face trying to stay dignified in a place built to strip it away. But then, like a spark in a storm, Ruth appeared. She sat at a table in the common area, a deck of cards spread in front of her. Her laughter boomed so loudly the staff glanced over in irritation. "You bet your pudding cup on that hand, sweetheart," she barked at a nurse before slamming her cards down in victory. I had not smiled in weeks, but that sound it cracked something inside me. She noticed my grin, crooked and hesitant, and beckoned me over. "You're new, and you've got that look. The look of someone who's been stabbed in the back by family." I sat down, and just like that, a thread was pulled. Ruth introduced me to Di, a sharp-tongued former librarian who had the memory of an elephant, and Maxine, tall and commanding, who carried herself with the air of someone who had argued her way through countless courtrooms. The three of them didn't just survive here. They carved out a kingdom of resilience within the beige walls. Soon I was drawn into their circle, and for the first time since arriving, I felt less like a ghost. We shared stories over watery coffee and bland stew. Ruth talked about her son who never visited unless he wanted money. Di recounted the years she spent watching children discover books, only to be left behind when her own family decided she was too much work. Maxine spoke with bitterness, but also pride how she once stood before judges demanding justice for others, yet now no one stood for her. Their stories cut deep, not because they were foreign, but because they were mirrors of my own. One night I finally told them everything, how my children had tricked me, how they had called it love while stealing the roof from over my head, how I cried the first night, not because of the sterile room, but because I realized I no longer existed to the people I raised. When I finished, silence fell heavy. Then Maxine leaned back, arms crossed, eyes sharp as a hawk. "Did you sign over the deed?" she asked. The question stopped my breath. My mind flashed to the old leather folio I had once used for important papers. My hands trembled at the memory of tucking it away. "No," I whispered. "I think I still have it." The next day, while the others napped or shuffled through activities designed to pass the time, I dug through the drawer of my narrow dresser. Beneath sweaters that smelled faintly of mothballs and antiseptic, my fingers brushed leather. My heart pounded as I pulled it free, the zipper stiff with age. Inside, there it was, the deed to my house. My name, my signature, untouched, untainted, still mine. I sat down hard on the edge of the bed, the papers shaking in my lap. Rage surged through me like wildfire. All the trust I had placed in my children, all the nights I had fed them when I went hungry, all the years I had sacrificed reduced to a plan to erase me. And yet, in that moment, I realized something vital. They had underestimated me. They had forgotten who I was. When I showed the others, Ruth let out a whistle that echoed through the hall. "Honey, you've got dynamite in your hands." Di nodded, already thinking ahead, her mind calculating possibilities. Maxine tapped the page with her long red nails. "They have your medical decisions, sure. But this is gold. This is your way out." The idea grew like a seed in my chest. Why should I sit here, decaying, while they plan to profit from my life's work? Why should I accept the role of victim when I still had the power to fight? That night, I prayed not for peace, not for strength, but for clarity. And in the quiet hum of the fluorescent light, I felt the answer burn through me. I had to sell the house before they did. The plan was dangerous, the risks enormous, but every step of my life had been a risk. Raising children alone, working until my bones ached, surviving the loneliness of widowhood. This was no different. In fact, it was the truest expression of who I had always been. We gathered in Maxine's room. The four of us crowded around her desk like conspirators. She examined the deed, my will, and the medical forms Karen had tricked me into signing. They control your health decisions, she said, voice low and precise, but not your property. If they try to forge your signature, it's fraud. If you act first, you win. I stared at the papers, my heart thundering. Then I'll sell it. I'll sell my house. I'll take the money and live the life they never wanted me to have. Ruth slapped the table, grinning like a pirate. That's the spirit. Time to show them they messed with the wrong woman. Di helped us navigate the facility's strict phone rules, slipping notes under doors and timing calls with the precision of a spy. Ruth claimed she still had the number of a real estate agent she once dated. He's probably bald now, but he owes me a favor. Maxine handled the legalities with an old contact of hers, a lawyer named Jack Winston, who had once been indebted to her. Slowly, piece by piece, the plan formed into something solid, something real. Each step gave me breath again. Each secret call, each quiet nod exchanged in the hallway was a spark reigniting inside me. I smiled at the staff when they walked past. I played the role of the grateful mother whenever Karen called with her fake sweetness. Yes, dear. I'm settling in just fine. No, you don't need to visit. Meanwhile, I was plotting my escape. The sale moved faster than I imagined. My neighborhood, it seemed, was a hot market. Within days, offers poured in. A buyer agreed to full asking price almost instantly. Jack handled the paperwork, discreet and efficient, while Di helped me set up a new bank account using the community center's computer. The money was wired into my name. Mine. For the first time in years, I had something that belonged solely to me. And yet, the hardest part was still ahead. Escaping. If they discovered the sale before I vanished, they would come after me, dragging me back into their control. So we planned carefully. Ruth bribed a young aide with a bottle of perfume and a pizza to skip her rounds one Friday night. Maxine secured transportation through a driver she knew could be trusted. Di double-checked every detail, making sure no trace led back to us. The night of our escape, I packed a single suitcase, my passport, a printed itinerary, 3 one-way tickets. I left a note on my pillow, short and sharp. Don't look for me. I've gone to find the life you stole from me. As we slipped into the Uber, the warm night air pressing against my skin, I felt something I hadn't felt in decades. Freedom. And beneath it, a darker ember, glowing hotter with every mile that carried us away from the beige prison. I was not running anymore. I was reclaiming. And God help anyone who tried to stop me. The airport lights shimmered like salvation. As we pulled up in that battered Uber with the broken air conditioning, my heart pounded so hard I thought the driver might hear it. Beside me, Ruth hummed nervously, clutching her handbag like it contained state secrets. Di kept whispering prayers under her breath, Latin phrases jumbled with English. Maxine, calm as ever, adjusted her scarf and looked like she was on her way to argue a case at the Supreme Court. And me? I sat in the middle, fingers tight around my suitcase handle, trying to believe this was real. Rome, that was our destination. A city I had only seen in movies, a place that felt like a dream too far away for someone like me. As the plane took off, Texas sprawled beneath us, a sea of lights fading into the black. I stared out the window, refusing to let tears fall. Not tonight. Tonight was victory. The flight was long, uncomfortable, and sleepless. My knees ached, my back protested, but I refused to close my eyes. I was afraid if I did, I might wake up back in that narrow bed at Oak Hills, with beige walls pressing in on me. Ruth snored with abandon, her head bobbing against the seat like a child's toy. Di held my hand tightly during takeoff and again during turbulence, whispering, we're safe, as if saying it enough could make it true. Maxine read a thriller, sipping tomato juice like she was on holiday. When we landed, the first blush of Roman dawn poured through the plane windows. The city stretched below, golden and ancient, every rooftop whispering of survival and beauty. My throat tightened. This was more than a trip. This was rebirth. We checked into a small pension in Trastevere, ivy curling across the balcony rails, cobblestone streets just below. The clerk barely blinked at 4 gray-haired women with too few suitcases. Rome had seen stranger things. In our room, I pressed my palms to the cool plaster wall and whispered, "I am free." The first days blurred into wonder. We walked until our feet gave out. Ruth haggled with a street vendor for scarves, cackling with triumph when she knocked the price down by half. Di bought postcards and wrote to her high school sweetheart who had been gone 15 years. Maxine flirted shamelessly with a cafe owner named Luca, who insisted we try his tiramisu on the house. And me? I stood before the Colosseum, wind in my hair, and realized I was no longer anyone's burden. I was Eleanor Grace Miller, alive in a world that had tried to bury me. But freedom has a way of stirring old ghosts. One night, curiosity dragged me to the pension's public computer. My inbox was full of emails from Karen. The subject line on the latest one made my stomach twist. "What have you done?" I didn't open it. I didn't need to. Her voice played in my head anyway, sharp, panicked, furious. The house was gone. The money was gone. So was I. I closed the laptop and stepped out onto the terrace. Maxine joined me, lighting a cigarette she wasn't supposed to have. "You don't feel guilty?" she asked. "I thought I would," I admitted. "But I don't. Not even a little." She blew smoke into the night. "They chose themselves. You finally chose you. About damn time." Her words lingered. For years I had defined myself by sacrifice. I had bent, given, surrendered. Now, for the first time, I had taken. And it felt like justice. We traveled north to Florence. Inside the Duomo, I stared at frescoes of heaven and hell, the colors blazing above me like judgment. I thought of George, of promises whispered late at night. "I'll take care of the kids no matter what." I never imagined I'd need to protect myself from them. That night, while unpacking in a creaky rented room, I discovered a folder tucked into my suitcase pocket. My breath froze. George's handwriting. 6 letters, written in the years before his death. I read them in silence, my hands trembling. He had seen it. Their entitlement, their manipulation, their hints that maybe it was time for Mom to move out, even when I was strong, healthy, capable. In his final letter, weeks before his heart gave out, he wrote, "Ellie, if they ever turn on you, fight back. Don't let them bury you before your time. You are stronger than you know." I wept into those pages, my grief and fury colliding. He had known, and he had left me this reminder. I was not weak. The next morning, I told the girls everything. Ruth slammed her coffee cup down and grinned. "Then we raise hell." Maxine leaned in, her eyes glinting. "I know a journalist who's been waiting for a story like this." Di nodded softly. "Eleanor, you could help others. You're not the only one." And just like that, my escape became something larger. No longer just survival. A mission. We reached out to Maxine's contact, Jack Winston, who sent my story to a journalist named Megan. She had a podcast, a following of women hungry for truth. Days later, she called, "I want to meet you. Your story matters." While we waited, we traveled still Venice with its drifting gondolas, Nice with its shimmering coast, Lisbon where the air smelled like salt and new beginnings. We laughed, danced, and posed for pictures that looked like they belonged in a calendar of fierce grandmothers. For the first time in years, I wasn't just surviving, I was healing. But the past was not finished with me. One evening on a beach in Portugal, my phone rang. A number I didn't know. Against my better judgment, I answered. "Grandma?" The voice cracked. I nearly dropped the phone. "Emily, my youngest granddaughter." Tears burned my eyes as she whispered, "I know what they did. I saw the letters. I heard the podcast. Please, don't hang up. I just want to talk to you." The ocean roared around me. The sand shifted beneath my feet. My past, my blood, my family broken but reaching out. I couldn't answer right away. My hand shook so badly Ruth had to take the phone from me. Emily was out there. She had seen the truth, and now she wanted me back. The war wasn't over. It had only just begun. Emily's voice lingered in my ear long after the call ended, a trembling thread that tied the past to whatever future was trying to form. I did not reply that night. I walked the shoreline until the wind bit my cheeks and the tide wiped our footprints away, as if erasing the old script of my life. Ruth wrapped an arm around my shoulders. Di pressed a cup of tea into my hands. Maxine watched quietly, knowing that what I was deciding could not be forced, only faced. 2 days later, the text arrived. A photograph of my old porch. The rose bushes were dug up, the swing removed, the shutters painted a dead, sensible beige. Beneath it, Emily had typed 3 words. They destroyed it. I stared until the image lost shape. My throat closed as if invisible hands were tightening there. I passed the phone around the terrace. Ruth swore under her breath. Di wiped her eyes with the cuff of her sweater. Maxine flicked her ash out into the dusk and said, almost gently, "Time to tell the world." We met Megan in a cafe that smelled like cinnamon and river mist. She carried her recording equipment in a scuffed backpack and introduced herself with a steady warmth that made me want to exhale. "Tell me everything," she said, and I did. I spoke of the late nights working double shifts while the children slept, the birthdays funded by coupons and prayer, the gentle words that hid knives, the day they lifted my life out of my hands and called it care. Megan did not interrupt. When I finished, she took my hand. "You are not alone," she said. "There are too many Ellies who think they are." The episode aired 1 week later. By dawn, the cafe owner was holding up his phone and smiling at me like I was someone he had always known. The download numbers rolled like a storm front. Messages flooded in from everywhere. Mothers who had been silenced. Daughters who regretted what they had done. Sons who had watched their fathers disappear into quiet rooms and wondered how to stop the same fate for their mothers. It was not validation I wanted, but a strange, fierce thing bloomed in my chest anyway. Not vindication. Witness. My children noticed. Of course they did. Karen sent a message that began with "How dare you" and ended in words I had never taught her to use. Luke called twice, his voicemail cold and measured, like a closing argument. David slurred threats that sounded like spilled liquor and old resentment. I deleted everyone. What I did not delete was Emily's email. She wrote that she had left home. She wrote that she could not stand the echo of my story in her mother's voice. She asked to meet. Anywhere but Texas. Savannah felt right. A city sown with magnolia and ghost light, where history does not vanish. It ripens. We arrived on a humid afternoon, air heavy with the smell of river water and sweet tea. In Forsyth Park, beneath a canopy of moss that moved like breath, a slim girl stood from a bench and wiped her palms on her jeans. She had Karen's eyes before life sharpened them. She had a softness I recognized as mine. "Hi, Grandma," she said. My knees went weak at the sound. I said hello like a prayer. We walked for hours. She asked about George, and the first night I met him at a county fair, about the time I forgot the casserole in the oven because Luke broke his arm and how the whole house smelled of smoke for a week. She told me she found the letters by accident, searching for her birth certificate. She told me she confronted them, and that Karen raised a hand. I felt something inside me break and settle at the same time. Emily was 16, and standing on a line that children should never have to draw. When she asked if we could try again, not mother and daughter, but grandmother and granddaughter, I said yes. The yes did not erase the past. It did not save the other relationships burning behind us. But it let oxygen into a room that had been sealed shut for years. A week later, over coffee and grits in a diner with cracked vinyl seats, she drew a star beside a name on a napkin. Eleanor Grace Foundation. "What if there was a place for women like you," she said, "and for families like mine who want to do better?" I laughed at the audacity and then stopped laughing because my chest hurt with hope. We had the mission, and thanks to the sale, we had the means to begin. We registered the nonprofit in a borrowed back office, the printer groaning like it disapproved of miracles. Emily wrote copy for a simple website that looked cleaner than our lives had ever felt. Di drafted resource packets. Ruth decided she was in charge of snacks and optimism. Maxine reclaimed her courtroom voice for our cause. A GoFundMe opened like a door in a burning house. Money poured in, $20, $5, $1,000, with messages that felt like hands on my back. "This happened to my mother. I thought I was alone. Thank you for speaking." We started small because small is how truth learns to walk. One legal clinic a week in a church basement that smelled of wood polish and old hymns. A Zoom circle for women who whispered from bedrooms they did not own. Mailers with checklists and scripts for saying no to manipulation that had always been called love. When a local news crew asked for an interview, I said yes because Lorraine, the reporter, had my same years in her eyes. At the end, she asked what I would say to the people who put me in that beige prison. I said, "I forgive you, but I will never forget who I became because you did." The line traveled farther than I expected, and I learned quickly that forgiveness is not a key you hand to a thief. It is a door you open for yourself. Luke tried to sue. The hearing lasted less than 10 minutes. Maxine went in my place and came out with lipstick unbothered, muttering that the judge had no patience for fiction dressed as law. David moved away. Silence grew where our conversations used to be. Karen left a voicemail I never listened to. Some chapters end without punctuation. We opened our first house upstate. 5 bedrooms, a porch with paint that would peel and be repainted and peel again because that is what porches do. We called it Grace House. On the day we cut the ribbon, my legs trembled and Ruth steadied me, whispering, "Do not you fall now, Queen." Women crossed the threshold holding duffel bags and photographs, holding their breath as if it might cost rent. They slept without fear for the first time in years. The house made its own soft music, kettles, low voices, the steady scratch of pens filling out forms. When spring came, we sailed north. It was a promise to ourselves. One bright thing for surviving the winter of our lives. The ship rose like a palace from the water. We boarded under cherry blossoms that fell like slow snow, every petal a benediction. In the ballroom, the lamps glowed like shared secrets. The band played an old Ella tune, and something inside me stood on its own. I walked to the center of the floor. There was no partner waiting. There was only the woman I had refused to abandon. The first step was clumsy. The second was honest. I moved slowly, as if arguing gently with time. People watched and then looked away and then watched again. I felt hands at my waist. Dennis, of all people, offering steadiness with a shy half-smile. We danced. Then others drifted onto the floor, older couples, a young mother with a baby strapped to her chest. A man who looked like grief had taught him how to sway. We were not pretending to be young. We were remembering how to be alive. When the music fell quiet, the applause rose warm and low. Back at the table, Emily was crying softly. "You looked like you were flying," she whispered. "I was," I said. For the first time, I was not dancing for anyone else. That night, the sky tore itself open with color. Green and violet waves moved above the dark water, a slow, holy fire. We stood under the aurora and spoke quietly about what we had been and what we were becoming. Emily asked if I missed them. I told her I missed who I imagined they were. I told her I would not let imagination chain me again. In Juneau, a helicopter lifted us into a blue that tasted like ice. We landed on a glacier that moaned like an old organ when the wind pressed it. Emily's hand found mine through the insulation of our gloves. I took out the copy of George's last letter that I had kept in my coat. The paper softened from being folded and unfolded. I let it go into the wind. It tumbled over the white and vanished, not lost, but carried. The ache loosened. The silence that followed was not empty. It was clean. When we returned to the ship, Ruth was already telling strangers that I had just flown without wings. Maxine ordered champagne and announced that we were toasting to beginnings, not endings. Di read a new poem about fire protected in cupped hands until it can stand the wind. I slept that night without dreams. In the morning, I woke to a horizon that did not ask me to explain myself. By the time we docked, the mission had shape. We were not running anymore. We were building. A home for the rising, not only for the broken, a place where women could come with nothing but a name and leave with a life that did not apologize for existing. I stood at the rail with coffee, warming my palms, and whispered to the water, "We are not finished." Then I turned and found my granddaughter smiling at me as if she already knew. The first house we opened was more than wood and paint. It was defiance turned into walls, grief hammered into nails, betrayal laid out as a welcome mat. We called it Grace House, and on the morning of its ribbon cutting, I thought my legs would give out. Ruth held me upright, whispering, "Don't you dare fall now, Queen." Women came carrying duffel bags, photo albums, folded up hope. Some looked like they hadn't been spoken to in years. They walked in broken, but I swear I saw the air itself soften to hold them. The house sang with its own music. Pots clattered in the kitchen. Laughter flickered down the hallway like candlelight, and late at night you could hear the muffled prayers of women who had forgotten how to speak them. I sat on the porch each dawn with my coffee, the wood warm beneath me, and thought, this is what freedom feels like. Not revenge, not escape, creation. But even as life bloomed in that house, the past reached for me like a shadow stretching across sunlight. The podcast episode had gone viral, then feral. News crews called, national outlets wanted interviews, CNN, NPR. Papers that had never once cared about women like us now clamored for a quote. I turned down most of them. I did not want to be spectacle. I wanted to be sanctuary. Still, some stories refused to be silenced. Lorraine, a local reporter my age, asked to come back. At the end of the interview, she leaned forward and asked softly, "If you could speak to the children who put you in that nursing home, what would you say?" My answer came steady. I forgive you, but I'll never forget who I became because of you. The clip spread like wildfire. Forgiveness has a way of catching fire, maybe because it is rarer than rage. Karen saw it. Luke saw it. David too. Luke tried to sue again, claiming I had stolen the house from under them. Maxine went in my place and burned him alive with words sharper than any blade. The judge dismissed the case in minutes. David disappeared out of state. Karen left a voicemail I never played. Silence is an answer too. But Emily stayed. She was more than a granddaughter now. She was my shadow and my star, fierce in her belief that what we were building mattered. She traveled with me to open another home in upstate New York. When the ribbon was cut, I collapsed into tears. Not of sorrow, but of gratitude. George would have said it looked like victory. Ruth teased that I cried prettier than most brides. Our circle grew. Ruth, against all odds, met someone. Dennis, a widower with a terrible sense of rhythm and an even worse taste in shirts, but he made her laugh so hard she wheezed. They argued about shuffleboard in Florida half the year and held hands like teenagers the other half. Di launched a poetry blog that somehow gathered thousands of readers. Every post ending with a line meant only for me. And still Eleanor rises. Maxine became our legal director, storming into courtrooms as if she had been preparing for this battle her entire life. She claimed red lipstick was her armor. I believed her. As for me, I kept traveling, kept telling the story, kept fighting. But my life was no longer about fighting against. It was about building for the women who crossed our thresholds, for Emily who carried our fire into the future, for George whose letters had whispered strength when I forgot my own. Months passed, and one autumn afternoon, I found myself standing across the street from my old house. A young couple lived there now. A baby swing hung from the porch beam. The paint was fresh, shutters blue again. For a moment, grief clenched my throat. But then I realized that house was no longer mine. Home was not wood or walls. Home was Grace House, Grace Haven. Home was wherever women chose to rise. 6 months later, the foundation grew beyond what I had ever imagined. Savannah became our anchor. Grace Haven opened its doors, wide porches stretching like arms, wisteria climbing its railings. Emily ran the operations with a determination that left me in awe. Women came with trembling hands and left with steady eyes. We built more than safety. We built resurrection. And the world noticed. We were nominated for the Women of Strength Legacy Grant, a lifetime endowment. The letter arrived in the mail on an ordinary morning. Sunlight catching the dust in the air as Emily and I baked lemon bars. Ruth nearly fainted when Maxine read it aloud. Di cried for a full 10 minutes, then wrote a poem about daisies and defiance. The grant meant we could open 3 more homes by year's end. But for me, the true weight of it lay in 5 words. We honor your work, Eleanor. No one had ever said that to me before. At the celebration, women from every house gathered in the garden. They wore pearls and jeans, lipstick and tears, all of them carrying stories heavy with betrayal but lighter with survival. They crowned me with a wreath Ruth had made from wildflowers, crooked and beautiful. I wore it like a crown, not of royalty but of resilience. That night, after everyone had gone to bed, I sat with Emily on the porch. She curled against me like she had when she was a child. You turned ashes into light, she whispered. I kissed her hair and said, No, baby, we did. And in that moment, with the moon hanging above Grace Haven and the laughter of healed women still echoing faintly in the walls, I knew this truth. I was no longer defined by what my children had taken. I was defined by what I had built. The past had burned me, but the future was mine to set aflame. Thanksgiving arrived at Grace Haven like a soft drumbeat. The sun came in through tall windows and turned the floors to gold. The air smelled of cinnamon and roasted turkey and cornbread cooling on racks that Maxine insisted were perfectly spaced. Outside, the lawn wore a quilt of red and orange leaves that crackled beneath every step. Wind chimes on the porch spoke in a quiet language, and for once I understood every word. Inside, real laughter rose and fell like music. Not the polite sound people make when they are pretending to be fine, but the improvised song of women who had remembered how to breathe. The long table had been donated by a woman once told that she was not fit to host anyone. Now it held mismatched plates, nicked silverware, candles in jam jars, and 22 stories seated shoulder to shoulder. Olivia sat near the window, a woman who had walked out of a marriage that tried to keep her voice small. Harriet warmed her hands around a mug of cider, rebuilding a life after her son emptied her accounts and left. Rosa, at 71, had learned to read and left little notes on the fridge that said light and soft and beginning. I looked from face to face and felt the strange and holy ache of abundance. They asked me to say a few words. I stood, the chair leg scraping the wood with a sound that felt like permission. I raised a glass, cider with the amount of bourbon George used to swear was medicinal. This year, I said slowly, I did not lose everything. The room stilled. I found everything I was missing. I named the things that had returned to me with new shapes. Self, family chosen by courage, purpose forged in ash. When I finished, hands touched hands, glasses clinked, and somewhere Rosa laughed so hard she startled herself and then laughed again. Later, the porch called me. Emily joined me with a blanket around her shoulders, the night crisp and pine-scented. You never told me what you wished for, she said. When you let that letter go in Alaska, I watched my breath fog and fade. I wished that someone would see me for who I really am. And now, I said, I wish that someone else will see herself before it is too late. She leaned into me. You are changing the world, Grandma. No, baby, we are. Winter arrived soft in Savannah. Mornings were crisp and clean, and the house glowed with string lights that made the hallways feel like they were guiding people home. Every room carried a story. Clara came with one suitcase and a photograph of the man she had loved for 46 years. Her children had emptied her bank account and left her in a motel 2 towns away. She did not speak much at first, but the garden coaxed her voice back 1 seed at a time. Naomi, a former nurse, had been placed in assisted living against her will. She taught chair yoga in the sunroom now, and in her voice I heard the steady heartbeat of a woman who had learned how to return. In January, we held a night of names. It was Di's idea. We gathered in a circle, candles cupped in both hands, and said the names of women we wanted to honor. Mothers, friends, versions of ourselves we had once been. When it was my turn, I said very quietly, Eleanor Grace Miller, the one who stayed too quiet for too long. The silence that followed did not sting. It settled. Respect for the woman who kept going when no one thanked her, who loved when it did not make sense, who finally stood when standing hurt. After the ceremony, Emily found me in the kitchen with her eyes still shimmering. I want to write a book, she said. About you, about all of this. I laughed, then saw she was serious. You think people want to read about a grandmother who sold her house out from under her children and ran off to Italy with a pack of retired rebels? Yes, she said without blinking. Because there are women who think it is too late. I want them to know it is not. That night I opened a spiral notebook and began. Not a memoir exactly, a map. Lessons you only learn when it is nearly too late. February brought a letter that felt like a bell rung in the chest. Maxine read it aloud in the common room while Ruth gripped the arm of her chair as if the ship were turning. The Women of Strength Legacy Grant. A lifetime endowment for our work. Ruth shouted, then swore, then wept. Di pressed her palms to her cheeks and laughed through tears. Emily spun me in a circle until the room spun back. I sat down only when my legs remembered they were 70-something, and also brand new. The money would open 3 more houses by year's end. But it was 5 words that undid me. We honor your work, Eleanor. Honor. I had lived decades without ever being offered that word. The news brought more attention than I wanted, but not more than I could bear. A local station returned to film a follow-up. This time they spoke to Olivia about the first time she slept without fear. To Rosa about the sticky notes that taught her hope syllable by syllable. To Naomi about the rhythm of breath. When the segment aired, our inbox filled to bursting. 3,000 messages in 2 days. Granddaughters asking how to help. Mothers asking if there was a house near them. We were overwhelmed, and then we were determined. Asheville opened, then Michigan, then plans for Oregon when the leaves turned again. I kept my morning ritual. Coffee on the porch, a notebook in my lap, a small prayer that sounded less like protection and more like gratitude. Every so often I watched a woman walk up the path for the first time, her shoulders tight with years of bracing, and I would go to the door and say what I wished someone had said to me sooner. You are not lost. You are just beginning. Spring came early as if it was impatient for more life. Wisteria wound itself around the railings. Daffodils pushed up like little brass bands. The garden party for the book felt inevitable once Emily found its title. Not done yet. It was not only my story. It was a testimony stitched from letters and porch conversations and small triumphs that taste bigger than any feast. We invited every woman who had passed through our doors and the families who had learned how to be family again. People change. Not all. Enough. Emily's father came with his wife, and a bouquet he held like an apology. Thank you, he told me, for giving her back to us stronger. Luke sent a lawyer's letter, muttering about defamation. We did not reply. Karen did not come. Absence can be loud. When the lights came down and the last plates were stacked in the sink, I sat on the porch again. Maxine settled beside me with a blanket and a sigh that sounded like contentment disguised as fatigue. Ruth and Dennis waved from their little cottage where the window glowed warm. Di was already inside, tapping a poem that I knew would end with a line carved for me. You did it, Maxine said. Did what? You rewrote the ending. No, I said after a while. I just started telling the truth. She laughed that gravelly laugh and said, that is the only ending that holds. One morning, the mail brought a cream envelope with our names lined up like a small army. The official award followed weeks later with a celebration that turned the lawn into a quilt of faces and chairs and paper lanterns. They set a flower crown on my head that Ruth made from whatever the garden would give, and I wore it with the pride of a woman who finally understood that royalty is not about ruling. It is about rising and helping others rise. That night I stood at my window and looked over the garden where so many had healed, where I had healed. I placed the certificate beside the framed copy of George's last letter and a photograph of the two of us on our wedding day. So young we believed the world would always understand us. I spoke to him aloud for the first time. I did it, George. You were right. I was stronger than I knew. A knock at the door interrupted me. Emily peeked in. Good night, she whispered. Come sit, I said. She curled up like she used to, and I told her that pride can be holy when it is born from survival. You turned ashes into light, she said. We did, I answered. In the quiet that followed, I realized that I was not living a second chance. I was living my life for the first time. Not as a mother forgotten or a woman discarded. As myself, in the morning, I walked the porch with coffee warming my hands and breathed the air as if it were new. A woman approached up the path, shoulders hunched, eyes wary. I opened the door before she knocked. Welcome home, I said. She looked past me into the house where kettles sang and voices murmured and light gathered in corners, and her face softened. The past no longer owned me. The future did not frighten me. I had become exactly what my children did not plan for. A fire that would not go out. A home that did not require permission. A name that belonged to me again. My name is Eleanor Grace Miller, and I am not done yet. They thought I would fade quietly into beige walls and cold sheets. They thought the story of Eleanor Grace Miller would end in silence, erased by betrayal and neglect. But they were wrong. What was meant to bury me became the very fire that rebuilt me. From ashes I rose. From loss I created. From abandonment, I forged a family that chose me not out of obligation but out of love. I have lived through the kind of betrayal that shatters the ground beneath you. I have seen the faces of children I raised harden into strangers. I have felt the sting of being reduced to a burden. And yet, here I stand not as a victim, not as a discarded mother, but as a woman who chose to fight back. The lesson is simple, but it cuts deep. You are never too old to begin again. You are never too forgotten to reclaim your name. You are never too late to rise. My story is not unique. There are thousands, maybe millions of women who have been silenced, erased, pushed aside by the very people they once sacrificed everything for. Some of them may be watching right now. Some of them may feel that the walls are closing in. To you, I say this. You are not finished. Your fire is not gone. All it takes is one spark, one act of defiance, one moment of choosing yourself again. And when you do, you will find that the world is still waiting for your voice, your strength, your truth. That is why we built Grace Haven. That is why I tell my story. Not to dwell in pain, but to shine a light for every woman still sitting in darkness, wondering if she has already been forgotten. You have not. You are here, and you still matter. If this story has stirred something inside you, if it has made you remember the strength you once had, or the strength of a mother, a grandmother, an aunt, or a friend, then don't let it end here. Join us. Share your story. Speak your truth. And most importantly, stay with us. Because here on Silent Lies, the stories are not quiet. They are loud, defiant, unforgettable. They are proof that betrayal can be turned into power, that silence can be broken, and that every ending can be rewritten. So subscribe now to Silent Lies. Be part of a community that refuses to be erased. Stand with us. Listen with us. Rise with us. The world tried to tell me I was finished, but I am not done yet. And neither are you.